If the committee and everyone will come to their senses. Criminal justice come to order, and the clerk call the roll.
Whitmire,
Present.
Flores,
Present.
Hinojosa, King. Quorum, sir.
There are 4 of us present, so we have a quorum. We can transact business. And the first bill we'll hear by Senator Zaffarini is Senate Bill 496. Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and members, Senate Bill 496 would direct the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement to conduct a study regarding improving training for call takers and dispatchers.
Very good. We have a couple of folks signed up. Jacqueline Visnestante with the Autism Society of Texas is in support, does not wish to testify. And T.J. Patterson with the City of Fort Worth is in support and does not wish to testify. Anyone else present that would like to testify for or against Senate Bill 496? If not, public testimony is closed, and Senator Flores moves that Senate Bill 496 be reported back to the full Senate with a favorable recommendation. Clerk, call the roll.
Whitmire,
Yes.
Flores,
Aye.
Hinojosa,
Aye.
King.
Aye.
4
There being 4 ayes, no nays, Senate Bill 496 is reported back to the full Senate with a favorable recommendation. Senator Flores moves it be certified for local consent. Is there objection? Chair is none, so granted. Good job, Senator Zaffarini.
1402.
Senator Birdwell.
1402. Two.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
They're quick. 1402.
Senate Bill 1402 by Senator Zaffarini. Senator Zaffarini has a substitute, which Senator Flores moves that we adopt a committee substitute to Senate Bill 1402. Is there objection? Chair is none. Senator Zaffarini to explain the substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The substitute simply makes technical changes requested by the Children's Advocacy Center. The bill simply directs the commission to work with the Governor's Sexual Abuse Survivors Task Force to establish basic education and training about sexual abuse.
Very good. We have my friend Justin Wood signed up in support, representing the Children's Advocacy Centers of Texas as a resource witness. Rio Backus, Texas Council on Family Violence, is in support, does not wish to testify. My good friend Thomas Parkinson. Thomas, would you stand? I'm not sure Thomas Parkinson really exists, but he signs up on every bill. So I had enough energy this morning to please recognize him, but I guess he's in another committee filling out a witness card. For real, he signs in on every bill, and I've never laid eyes on him. Thank you, Thomas, for being here. Liz Boyce, Texas Association Against Sexual Assault, is in support, does not wish to testify. Matt Dowling, Texas Medical Association, is in support, does not wish to testify. Anyone else would like to testify for or against committee substitute for Senate Bill 1402? Not. Public testimony is closed. Senator Flores moves that committee substitute for Senate Bill 1402 be reported back to the full Senate with a favorable recommendation. Clerk, call the roll.
Whitmire,
Present.
Flores,
Aye.
Hinojosa, King.
Aye.
4-0.
Show Senator Huffman present and voting aye. There being 5 ayes, no nays, committee substitute for Senate Bill 1402 is reported back to full Senate with a favorable recommendation. Senator Flores moves that this committee substitute for Senate Bill 1402 be certified for local and consent. Is there objection? Chair is none, so granted. Anything else, Senator Zaffarini?
Yes, the committee
We're here to
substitute.
please.
The committee substitute for Senate Bill 2479. I've already laid out the bill. It's just the new committee substitute.
Okay, Senator Flores moves that we adopt a committee substitute for Senate Bill 2479 and recognize, is there objection to the adoption? Chair is none, so granted. Senator Zaffarini to explain the difference.
There are no changes in the committee substitute, Mr. Chairman and members. It's just shorter. It eliminates sections 1, lines 45 and 48 to 49. That's what Senator Huffman objected to. So we just struck it.
Sounds good. Do you want to give us the general concept? That was the bill.
Well, what is left, it would provide judges with the discretion to order an interview and report about persons suspected to have a mental illness and who are charged with a Class C misdemeanor. Harmonize mental health personal bonds and clarify the procedures for a peace officer who transports an apprehended person to a facility.
Got you covered. Senator Huffman worked with you. I think it's discretionary now. It's a better bill. Thank you, Senator Huffman and Zaffarini. Senator Flores moves that committee substitute for Senate Bill 2479 be reported back to full Senate with a favorable recommendation. Clerk call the roll.
Whitmire.
Yes.
Flores. Hinojosa. King. Huffman. Yes.
6 ayes,
5.
5 ayes, and no nays. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 2479 is reported back to full Senate with a favorable recommendation. Senator Flores moves that committee substitute for Senate Bill 2479 be certified for local and consent. Is there objection? Chair hears none. So granted. What else, Senator?
That's it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And
Have a pleasant day.
Birdwell has 2.
Senator Birdwell, Senate Bill 1896. Jumps out at me. What are you ready for?
I'm ready for either one, Dean.
Senate Bill 1896 by Ward Birdwell. I understand there's a committee substitute, and Senator Flores moves that we adopt that committee substitute to Senate Bill 1896. Is there objection to the adoption? Chair is none, so granted. Senator Birdwell to explain the difference.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dean Whitmire, members of the committee. Under current law, when an inmate passes while in the custody of a law enforcement agency, an investigation is launched and conducted by an outside law enforcement agency to determine the inmate's cause of death. For facilities operated by the TDCJ, there are 2 circumstances where a full investigation is not required. If the individual dies of natural causes while attended by a physician or is lawfully executed. For county jails, every custodial death requires an investigation with no exceptions. However, there are instances when an inmate's death does not indicate wrongdoing, nor does it fall within the 2 exceptions for TDCJ facilities. Unexpected or natural deaths such as cardiac arrest or cancer can and do occur, but should not require full-scale criminal investigation. Historically, the Texas Rangers have been that law enforcement agency primarily responsible for investigating custodial deaths of inmates. 2017, the Texas legislature amended the law to require the Texas Jail Commission to appoint a law enforcement agency other than the one that operates the county jail to investigate the death of an inmate who dies in a county jail. As a result, the Texas Rangers experienced an increase from 76 custodial death investigations in 2017 to 126 in 2018, a 60% increase. The average custodial death investigation consumes about 30 hours of investigative time. Of all custodial death investigations that the Rangers conducted in 2019-2020, approximately 45 investigations were of inmates who died of natural causes while under the care of a physician. By amending the regulations of custodial deaths, the Texas Rangers could reallocate the 1,350 hours of investigative hours of resources to other investigations where criminal activity was present. Members, you do know I have a committee substitute. It's been adopted at this time. Committee substitute limits the bill by removing changes to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice and only amends the regulations regarding custodial deaths in county jails. Under this substitute, if an inmate dies from natural causes, an investigation by appointed law enforcement agency is not required. However, the cause of death must still be determined by a physician during an autopsy or examination of the deceased. The proposed changes in the committee substitute will more closely align with custodial deaths by natural causes in county jails with the natural causes exceptions applied to TDCJ facilities. And it's important to note that it's not just because it would not be a requirement, a law enforcement agency may still conduct or request an investigation if they so choose. With that, Mr. Chairman and Dean Whitmire, I would ask your favorable consideration.
Show Senator Miles present. We have Brian Collier with Texas Department of Criminal Justice signed up as a resource witness. Brandon Wood, Texas Commission on Jail Standards, is a resource witness. Jason Taylor, Texas Rangers, is a resource witness. A.J. Louderbeck, Sheriff, Regional Alliance Representative, is in support, no testimony. James Parnell with Dallas Police Association is in support, no testimony. And Ray Hunt with HPOU is in support. Anyone else present that'd like to testify for or against Senate Bill Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 1896? Not public testimony is closed. Senator Flores moves that Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 1896 be reported back to the full Senate with a favorable recommendation.
Whitmire.
Yes.
Flores.
Yeah.
Hinojosa.
Aye.
Huffman.
Aye.
Miles.
Yes.
King.
Aye.
6-0, sir.
6 ayes, no nays. Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 1896 reported back to full Senate with a favorable recommendation. Senator Flores moves that Senate Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 1896 be certified for local and consent. Is there objection? Chair is none. Senator Birdwell, on Senate Bill 1166, I understand there is a substitute which Senator Flores moves that we adopt. Senator Flores moves that we adopt committee substitute for Senate Bill 1166. Is there objection to the adoption? Chair hears none, so granted. Senator Birdwell to explain the substitute.
Thank you, Dean Whitmire and members of the committee. Under current law, burglary of a vehicle is a Class A misdemeanor, but can range up to a third-degree felony depending upon various factors, including criminal history and the intended theft within. The only penalty enhancement that specifies the types of items stolen is the burglary of a wholesale distributor vehicle with the intent to steal a controlled substance, which is a third-degree felony. As a result, there is no penalty difference for someone who burglarizes a vehicle and gets away with electronics versus someone who gets away with a firearm. Just last week, Houston's ABC Channel 13 did a story on the trend of firearm thefts resulting from vehicle burglaries. And per the Houston Police Department, 3,700 guns were stolen from cars in 2021, with an increase of 18% in 2022 to 4,400 stolen firearms. This presents a major gap in the law, and the result of these vehicular burglaries negatively impacts the owner, who now has a damaged vehicle and stolen property. In Tarrant County, there have been instances where an individual or police officer caught someone breaking into their vehicle, and in response, the suspect started shooting a firearm and attempted to run away. After the suspect was arrested and the gun was recovered, police learned that the firearm came out of another burglary of an auto. SB 1166 seeks to close this gap by adding the penalty enhancement of burglary of a vehicle with the intent to commit theft of a firearm as a third-degree felony. And members, the committee substitute, as filed, could help address the issues Texans are facing by adding the penalty enhancement of burglary with the intent to commit theft of a firearm. However, it will likely be more difficult to prove that the individual broke into the vehicle intending to steal a firearm, and therefore the charge would likely remain a Class A misdemeanor if they're unaware and actually never possess the firearm during the burglary. Committee substitute for SB 1166 seeks to fix that by changing the penalty enhancement of theft of a firearm during the burglary of a vehicle. Thus, an individual does not have to know there's a firearm in the vehicle, but if they choose to steal the firearm while burglarizing the vehicle, they can then be charged with a third-degree felony. And Committee Substitute 1166 aims to close that gap in the law. That's an issue that's becoming
So
increasingly
if they just happen
dangerous.
to run across a gun, and
They better not take it, because it'll be a third-degree felony. I'm sure they'll be
if
real
they're really
worried about
going for
that.
the purse,
Yeah.
and then
Well,
they
in fact-
acquire a gun, you're going to enhance it.
Yeah. Sheriff Wayburn was supposed to be here this morning, Dean, but he got hung up on Interstate 35, a problem I've had between Waco and here on occasion. But he said that what they're seeing is folks with, whether it's an NRA sticker, any kind of sticker
Really?
that indicates that they're
Just came from the gun store?
Or sometimes, I'm sorry.
but you're
Sometimes
seeing those type
people
of
have,
vehicles.
Like their gun racks, they actually, out in the country, that happens. Yeah.
So you're seeing that type of,
Oh, I understand if there's a gun visible, like a gun rack or something, it's more serious. I just wonder if they just run across it in the glove box, you're gonna,
my
You better
committee
leave it
sub,
alone, huh?
my committee sub, if you've stolen the vehicle and then you abandon the vehicle and then the weapon's still there, it's still a Class A misdemeanor. Because you may not have been aware that the firearm was there. But if you've stolen the vehicle for the purpose and then in fact take the weapon, you're now not,
Comes with
as
fact.
law is now, it's still just a Class A misdemeanor.
yeah.
This would make it a third-degree felony to
Okay,
willfully steal the firearm.
very good. Jessica Anderson is signed up with the Houston Police Department as a resource witness. A.J. Loudermilk with Texas Sheriff's Regional Alliance is in support. Thomas Parkinson is in support, does not wish to testify. C.J. Grissom does want to testify. Mr. Grissom, state your name and who you represent, please, sir.
Yes,
You
sir.
got 2 minutes.
I won't even need all that. My name is CJ Grisham, President and Founder of Open Carry Texas, here to speak in support of Senate Bill 1166. Open Carry Texas is a state-based grassroots gun rights organization focused on the Second Amendment. We also believe in gun safety as well as holding criminals accountable that abuse their right to keep and bear arms. So we are always in favor of steeper penalties for anyone that uses a gun to commit a crime, uses a gun to threaten or injure another person, or steals a gun to create, obviously they're going to probably commit a crime with that as well. So we do ask on behalf of Open Carry Texas that you pass this bill favorably. And
Very
pending
good.
your questions.
I don't believe so. You did a good job. Thank you for being here. Anyone else present would like to testify for or against committee substitute for Senate Bill 1166? If not, public testimony is closed. Senator Flores moves that committee substitute for Senate Bill 1166 be reported back to full Senate with a favorable recommendation. Clerk call the roll.
Whitmire,
Yes.
Flores, Hinojosa, Huffman,
Aye.
Miles, King. 6-0, sir.
6 ayes, no nays. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 1166 is reported back to the full Senate with a favorable recommendation. Senator Flores moves that committee substitute for Senate Bill 1166 be certified for local and consent. Is there objection? Chair is none so granted. Thank you, Senator Birdwell.
Thank you, Dean.
Good job. Senator West, on Senate Bill 2287. Do you have more than one? Yeah, which one you want first?
11, let's get.
1146, got witnesses on that. Chair lays out Senate Bill 1146. There is a substitute which Senator Flores moves that we adopt the committee substitute to Senate Bill 1146. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senator West to explain committee substitute for Senate Bill 1146.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members. After conferring with the department, there were several provisions, a couple of provisions in the bill that needed to be addressed, and we addressed those provisions, more specifically the issue of security-type issues. And so we worked with the department to take those provisions out, but worked also with the department to kind of put in some standards as it relates to things that should be done during the transportation of female inmates for medical care. The issues, this was raised by women, the Incarceration Women's Project. And so they came to myself and also Chairman Click in the House with several of these issues. And so the issues facing the women addressed by this bill are as follows. Any searches conducted while the women are being transported will be done in an area and a manner that conforms with the requirements of the Prison Rape Elimination Act of 2003. Buses used to transport inmates will have an adequate supply of toilet paper, okay, and feminine hygiene products for the inmates being transported. Female women will receive sufficient food and nutrition when being transported. Facilities used to house female inmates overnight while being transported will have adequate number of beds for those being transported. The bill also includes language to encourage the use of telemedicine and telehealth services for female inmates. That's what it does.
Very good. Any questions, the author? We have several witnesses. Deborah Gore. Ms. Gore, would you like to come forward and testify? State your name and who you represent, please.
My name's Deb Gore, and I'm representing myself, and I am in favor of Senate Bill 1146.
And I'm going to give you adequate time, but I'm asking most witnesses to try to be mindful of about 2 minutes. which
Absolutely.
Most committees insist on. I'm a little more flexible, but go right ahead. Thank you for being here.
I've had the privilege of working with incarcerated women for about 10 years, and I respect the leadership of TDCJ. I know that many of those in leadership deeply care about the women that they supervise. Additionally, I respect that safety, both for regular citizens and for incarcerated women, is a top priority. But medical chain can improve without sacrificing safety. I do not believe that the leadership of TDCJ wants to make medical chain hard on women, but I do believe that the leadership can find reasonable, thoughtful, helpful ways to improve medical chain. The experience is traumatic, and I don't use that word lightly. This multi-day ordeal, women are usually chained to another woman, and while they're both sick and in need of medical care, while women are seated on hard metal benches without seat belts, while women have seizures or have broken arms or are recovering from surgery, they are chained to one another. Other women will talk about the toilet and the difficulties there, Plain State and the difficulties with very aggressive strip searches. But I wanted to make sure that you understood that this bill is intended to ease medical chain in two ways: make the actual trip less traumatic, and also make the actual trip less common. We strongly support the use of mobile medical diagnostic units to go to the various prisons and provide on-site care for things like biopsies or physical therapy or x-rays or mammograms. This will lessen the difficulties of the journey, but also protect the public at large because fewer inmates will need transport. It can improve. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Next, we have Jennifer Toon. Ms. Toon, how are you? State your name and who you represent.
Yes, sir. My name is Jennifer Toon, and I represent Lioness Justice Impacted Women's Alliance and myself, and I am for the bill. As the project director for Lioness and a policy fellow for the Coalition of Texans with Disabilities, I hear from almost 200 currently incarcerated women, and they constantly ask, dare I say even beg, for help concerning the indignities they experience during medical transport. I understand their desperation because I have been on those trips. I was incarcerated for almost 20 years, and at one point I needed medical care at the hospital in Galveston. But after 2 trips, I refused the third. The indignities I faced, from the shackles, the strip searching, lack of sanitation, lack of privacy while using the restroom on the bus, to the inadequate food and bedding, was enough to discourage me from medical care. And this is very often what happens. Women refuse medical care. Sometimes holding on to that scrap of dignity means even more than life or death. And the difficulties on this trip affect the most vulnerable women in TDCJ, women with disabilities, the elderly, women who are receiving intense treatments and surgery. The problems of medical transport for women have been made worse after the escape last year, really escalating and magnifying the problems that already exist for women. The concerns, I do want to address that the concerns about contraband are just not the same for women during these trips. We don't hide handcuff keys and cell phones. I never saw that. 20 years of incarceration. Women hide makeup and food on these trips because we often don't have enough to eat during medical transport. So we're asking this committee to continue your previous efforts to protect and restore the dignity of incarcerated women by passing this important piece of legislation. Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you, ma'am. Marcy Simmons. State your name, please, and who you represent.
Yes, sir. Good morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Marcy Simmons. I'm representing Lioness Justice Impacted Women's Alliance and myself. I'm in support of this bill. Layover for medical trips from Gatesville to where most of the women's prisons in Texas are, all the way to Galveston, where the hospital is. The layover place is Plain State Jail. I went through Plain State Jail during my incarceration, and I know exactly what those strip searches are like. I'm going to be very frank. Please forgive my language for time's sake. I remember being strip searched, being told to lean back, spread my lips open, and show more pink while the officer peered into my vagina with a flashlight. We're in contact with members of Lioness that are still incarcerated, and these invasive and unnecessary strip search practices are still going on at that unit where these ladies are stripped to and from those hospital trips. I was also housed on a maximum security unit for 10 years. I'm going to touch on the contraband real quick. I never once saw a cell phone. I never once saw any drugs with the exception of marijuana one time. And I never once saw any weapons. What I did see is free world makeup, art supplies, tattoo ink.
Let me interrupt.
Yes, sir.
Put this in a proper context. What were you incarcerated for?
I was incarcerated for theft over $200,000, sir.
In which unit were you saying was the max?
The Dr. Lane Murray unit
Where?
in Gatesville, Texas.
How many years did you spend?
I spent a little over 10 years, sir. I had a 20-year sentence.
Out of where?
Out of Johnson County.
Okay. Thank you for being here.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me. I appreciate y'all for hearing me today. The first time I was on transport, I had been incarcerated for 8 months
Go ahead, don't worry.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And I was transported from Dayton, Texas to Gatesville, Texas. I was handcuffed to a lady who had done already over 20 years. About 3.5 hours into the trip, I told her, I think I need to use the ladies' room. And she just looked at me and said, honey, you should have put on a bunch of pads because I don't go to that toilet. And at that time, in my incarceration, I didn't know how to assert myself in that situation, so I simply didn't go. A little bit later, when I witnessed a woman trying to, excuse my bluntness, change her tampon in the middle of the bus on the open toilet in open view of everyone, I quickly realized what my traveling companion was talking about. And I just wanted to describe that toilet very quickly. We're talking about a hole in the middle of the bus, and we did pass out pictures to your office of those buses, the inside of those buses. There are seatings here where inmates have your back to you, and then what they did is they took out some seats and put a toilet there. So then there's also seatings here where inmates are facing you. There's seatings all across. There's the driver that has full view when they're not watching the road, right? And then your officers also have a full view, which may be male or female. So imagine having cancer and denying your medical treatment to avoid these indignities. And we saw that happening, and it's still happening today. So I'm just asking that you vote favorably for this bill to return dignity to the incarcerated women in Texas. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer Owens? State your name, please, and who you represent.
Hello, Senators. My name is Jennifer Owens. I represent Lioness and myself, and I support Senate Bill 1146. Super nervous. I'm so sorry. I came here today from Dallas, Texas, to give my testimony on medical chain. I was diagnosed with congestive heart failure prior to my incarceration. I have been on medical chain multiple times. It is a very hard trip to endure for anyone that is sick or elderly. It is long, it is hot, it is traumatizing, it is degrading. I have witnessed elderly women on walkers, on canes, with oxygen tanks, going through this whole process, and that's why I'm here today. I want to make it known that I'm not here to speak disparaging comments on our criminal justice system or TDCJ. I am here today for the elderly women that are incarcerated, they are sick, and they have no voice. The language of this bill on page 2, line 8, it references telemedicine and telehealth. I believe that would reduce a lot of stress on these elderly and sick women that are housed in TDCJ. And also, I would imagine that it would reduce strain on our criminal justice system as well. Please consider this bill. Thank you for your time today, Senators, and the service that you do for our great state.
Thank you, ma'am. Mandy Zapata? I'm sure I messed that one up. Tell me how. Your name and who you represent.
It's Zapata.
Zapata, thank you. Your handwriting is so
For
tiny.
time's sake, I'm going to read this, and I'm going to read from a personal experience. My name is Mandy J. Zapata. I represent Lioness Justice Impact Women's Alliance and myself, and I am in favor of Bill 1146. I am speaking from my experience as a former inmate who had to take numerous hospital trips during her stay within TDCJ. However, the last trip before I started refusing was the most traumatizing of them all. I had to have surgery for a partial hysterectomy and bladder sling, a major surgery that requires 4 to 6 weeks to recover with pain medicine. I had no such time to recover and no medicine to ease the pain. A day after my surgery, I was transported, and it was by far the worst of my experiences with medical transportation. I was in pain and sore. In prison, there is only one thing you had control over as an inmate, and that's yourself. However, at times, the system even manages to take that from you. On the trip back to my unit, while I was handcuffed to another inmate, a fight broke out. I was vulnerable and unable to manage my composure as my handcuffed partner was very reactive to the drama. I did not care about the commotion as I already had been desensitized to such displays. Since I suffered by But yet I suffered by having to move and react as I was yanked from here to there as my partner decided to do as she wished. The officer just yelled from behind the gate that separated the two sections of the buses. The girls eventually calmed down as others yelled for them to stop, since we were all becoming victims, seen as those who were handcuffed to each other. Two reactive people were indirectly subjected to their reactions and not our own. No cases were written, as by the time the officer decided to get up and unlock the door, everyone had settled down, though she did threaten to write everyone up on the bus for the commotion. Secondly, I was unable to bend or squat comfortably, yet I was still required to strip at each arrived location and departure. It was hard, but the officers did not care. They still managed to say inappropriate things, which I was still feeling very vulnerable. And actually, being unable physically to meet some of their demands at times, it just contributed to my fear of getting a case. I was grateful to arrive at my unit, but I was miserable. I was supposed to return for a follow-up appointment and refused it. I was still healing, and I did not like the feeling of being any more exposed and vulnerable than I already was in my condition, especially since the trip not only handcuffed you to a stranger, but it also mixes units. There are people who are fresh to the system and some who are not as easy to control. It's like playing the lottery with your time and your life. And if it's a matter of safety and security, it just wasn't for
I
us.
didn't say so.
I'm sorry, sir.
Very good.
Thank
Any
you.
questions? Thank you for
So,
being
any
here.
questions?
Vanessa, Don Gardner? Let it go off. That kind of gives them at least, and then I'll just have to extend it.
Good morning. My name is Vanessa Gardner, and I'm in favor of Senate Bill 1146. It's nice to see you again, Senator Whitmire. We worked on a project in Houston. I'm here today because in 2003, I was sentenced to 8 years for theft by check. Upon my sentencing, the judge told me that I would be stationed at a unit called Dr. Lane Mary, which was known as a medical unit. When I arrived at medical unit, Dr. Lane Mary, they did not have a medical unit. They did have a brace and limb, which has orthopedic doctors. I was seen by him, and he told me that there was nothing they could do for me because I needed surgery. My right ankle was shattered, and my left ankle had 2 fractures.
From before incarceration or after you arrived?
And
Fracture.
at my sentencing, I had these ailments. So I was in a cast on one and a walking cast on the other. So I started my incarceration.
Unrelated to your charge?
My charge was uncovered because of that. The checks was in the car when I had an accident.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, sir. So I was told
Harris
that.
County?
I'm sorry?
Harris County?
No, that was Dallas County,
And how long was the sentence?
2003 to 2008.
Did you have prior?
No.
You have,
So after my
did
incarceration,
you have a
I,
court-appointed attorney?
yes, sir. And he told me to take the plea.
So you pled?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Sorry about your experience.
Yes, so they couldn't help me, so they just put me in a walking cast. So for my
You had a car accident. They discovered the checks during the investigation of the accident.
Yes, sir, they did.
Then you get a court appointment,
And I got a court appointed.
and you end up doing 8 years.
Yes, sir. I was sentenced to 8 years, and I did actually 5 years on an 8.
Okay.
And so after that, they said that they couldn't help me, and so they put me on the medical chain. The first time I went through that horrific trip, I didn't even get to see a doctor. They said they were backed up.
Yeah.
And so I had to just go back. When you go on a medical chain, they pack up all your stuff. So where you were stationed at, what dorm you were in, you're not going to be in that dorm when you get out. So you start the process all over, just like classification when you first come in. So you have to learn and adapt to a new dorm and new people each time you leave on a medical chain. It's very rarely that you come back to your same assigned bunk. When I came back from the medical chain after not seeing the doctor, so it was a wasted trip, I was placed in closed custody because classification was closed. So I had to stay in closed custody over the weekend until Monday when classification returned, and they placed me in a new dorm that I was not used to. My second trip, I did see the doctor, only to be told that this was not John Hopkins. So what did I want him to do for me? Like I requested to come on the medical chain. So after I was released in 2008, I had to have 3 surgeries to reconstruct my ankle because it healed improperly. So I am asking you to take a look at this because I was released in 2008, and today in 2023, there has been no change. It's exactly the way it was when I experienced the medical chain from 2003 to 2008. So I ask for you to take a closer look, because Texas, we can do better. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Well, first of all, thank you for being here. If you don't mind, what is your current occupation? How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking, sir. After my incarceration, I went back to school and I became the head chaplain at Harris County Sheriff's Office, where I met Senator Whitmire. Today, I've started Don's Lighthouse. It's a transitional housing for women coming out of prison, and we get them the proper medical care because I have partnerships with medical agencies that see after them. Just yesterday, I had a lady who had served 7 years in prison. She was given medication that she should have only been on for 1 year. She had been on it for 3 years, and now she has kidney failure and has to do dialysis. This could have been prevented if she had received proper medical care.
Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for what you're doing in Harris County.
Thank you for allowing me.
Let's stay in touch.
Thank you.
Brian Collier signed up as a resource witness, and I'd like to call Brian at this time. State your name and who you represent.
Morning, sir. Brian Collier, Executive Director, Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Here's a resource.
How many women do we have incarcerated? What's your census today of women?
Right around 9,000.
9,000?
Yes, sir.
You know, the transporting of inmates is obviously a challenge, and we all know the tragedy in transporting an inmate. Time flies, over a year from ago.
Yes, sir.
So you have a very tough job, but is there no classification on or risk assessment? I understand someone could have a nonviolent conviction, but either through peer pressure or other influences, they could turn to violence. But, you know, Brian, I know you're a man of faith, and I think you've got probably, if not the toughest job in state government, certainly in the top 2 or 3. These are human beings that we've heard from this morning.
Yes, sir.
And we shouldn't have to have a hearing or even a proposed law to treat people like humans, with security being a major consideration. How can we do better? And why haven't your wardens and others joined in this effort? So the floor is yours to just say what you're doing, but I don't want to hear excuses. I want to hear action, and security being the utmost importance. I didn't ask all the ladies what their conviction was for. I've been to women's prison. There's some bad actors there, some dangerous actors, but I'm not so certain that there's either a classification, or certainly the transportation can't be more current. I mean, this is probably what they were doing 50 years ago, and you've been director for several years. You've made some real reforms, but sound like to me you got a job to do passing this legislation, but it's really beyond the legislation. It's just treating people like you'd like to be treated, with security being what the state charges you with. So how the hell do we get in this hearing?
Yes, sir. A few things that we've done, and I won't try to give you any excuses at all. And I will tell you that certainly even this bill helps us look deeper into that issue as we treat our female inmates and look at how we do that and challenge some of the things that we've done and had in place for many, many years. Some of the things that we have been working on over the last year are to significantly improve the telemedicine options that we have. The universities have purchased mobile MRI equipment, lots of other equipment. That's a post-Lopez escape. Some of the things that we put in place after that. We have reduced day-to-day transports from nearly 2,000 a day to last week we're running about 1,100 a day. So we have been able to reduce the number one. I think number one is try to reduce the number of times we have to move somebody for medical purposes. I think number two would be Gatesville and Galveston are the two locations that we're primarily talking about. And many times there's a stop in between at the Plain State Jail, and someone may have to overnight there and try and identify a better way for us to do that process. Plain State Jail is not really appropriate to house a lot of our medical inmates, so Gatesville would be more appropriate, but when you have to go for certain treatment, being able to do that in a way that's more humane and a more not soft is not the right word, but a way that's more friendly to the population, but at the same time matches what we need to do for security. The buses that we have, we just retired our last unair-conditioned bus, so we have all air-conditioned buses now, so a lot of things have changed over the years. The way we do it, we do classify and house, so an administrative segregation or restrictive housing, inmates not housed on a bus, they're in a separate area of the bus, but unfortunately medical transport, everyone's going that way. There's going to be several on the bus that may be from different facilities that are going to Galveston or to the Plain State Jail to overnight as we go through there.
I've always wondered, let me interrupt you before I forget. I always wonder why you handcuff one inmate to another. Wouldn't it be just as safe to handcuff them maybe to their seat so they're not controlled by other folks that may be
Certainly have looked at
more
that.
non-compliant?
Yes, sir. And this bill made us took another look at that and challenged really what we do. So if we handcuff them together, if they do have to go to the restroom, that becomes an issue. That's
Or
very
a fight or anything,
Yes, sir.
an accident, an automobile accident.
The reason was to handcuff them together so that you had a free hand, so that if I do have to go to the restroom, I've got a free hand. We've looked at other options. We're continuing to look at
slow
other
down.
options.
So if you need to go to the restroom, you take your partner with you?
Yes, sir. You'd be handcuffed to another inmate. That inmate would go and sit beside the toilet.
I
when
need to
you-
sit on the toilet or
Sir?
pee or whatever the occasion.
Yes, sir.
Because I'm handcuffed to someone else, they're going to go with me?
Yes, sir.
You know, I don't think it takes a very high IQ to know that there could be a better way to do that. I mean, and it gets to my point, why don't you have them just secure in their chair or in their seat, and then they're not commingled with someone that either is wanting to cause a disturbance or have to take them to the restroom with me?
Yes, sir. Certainly just about any one of the options you look at, there's a potential up and downside. So let's say you put them.
What's the security risk?
If you handcuff them to the seat, then getting up to go to the restroom is not something that's easily done while we're in transport because the officer in the back is in a secure area. The two officers in the front are in a secure area. So there's no real way to go back and unlock you to go to the restroom. If you handcuff just the legs.
So it's two people handcuffed? Just two?
Yes, sir.
So you and I are traveling.
Yes, sir.
So I need to go to the restroom, so you've got to go wherever I go.
Yes, sir.
That seems nuts to me.
Certainly looking at that, but if you use leg irons and only leg irons and you
just
don't handcuff, you
me to
potentially
the
have a
handcuff.
fall hazard.
You can't just handcuff me to my chair?
I can, but I can't necessarily get to you if you need to get up.
Someone would have to undo them and take them to the
Yeah,
restroom
yeah.
in the secure area, right?
Sure.
Center West.
Ryan, what about other states? How do other states handle the situation?
Many states do what we do as well, or either they handcuff them together with their hands. So that you may have leg irons and you may have both hands cuffed. Or you could be handcuffed to another. That wouldn't be uncommon. I'm not done looking at this issue. At the same time, we've had our
Hold on
folks.
just a second. So handcuff their hands together and also leg irons.
Yes, sir.
And so they would be separated, but they'd be secure
Correct.
and would be able to use the restroom without someone else going with them.
The issue would be your hands are handcuffed, so that might be an issue for a female trying to use the restroom.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Well, probably not a new issue for you, but I would certainly, all facets of the incarceration need to continue to be reviewed. And when you listen to folks that have come through the system, I hope we learn from it. It probably shouldn't be new to your wardens or even staff. I mean, the challenges and like I understand, there's a security concern. I'm certain there's a staffing issue. I know you're probably still understaffed.
Yes, sir.
And so I know Finance Committee has addressed some of your security concerns.
Yes, sir. Y'all been fantastic. I
But,
couldn't
but
ask for more.
it's got to filter down and reach the inmates. Obviously, they're there because the state sent them there, but we do have a responsibility for their safety and welfare while we are confining them.
Yes, sir.
And in many of my talks to groups, I do talk about, in my judgment, which you don't deal with, but you have to handle it, the over-incarceration of women. Most are there for nonviolent offenses. And, they may have taken someone's property, but by far, most of the 9,000 are there for, in fact, I'll even point out today, you probably have around 300 sex workers that, in my judgment, should be in a life skills course back in their community, either drug or alcohol treatment, mental health treatment, and certainly help them stay away from their pimp and or their human trafficking.
Yes, sir.
So I think we just have to keep in mind that it needs to always be evolving and try to improve the circumstances. And the problem I just pointed out of the over-incarceration, I hope everyone can hear that concern. No question, the violent individuals, and there are some, actually. How many women do you have on death row?
Off the top of my head, it's a small number.
Small number, but the courts have found some women violent, and they're being held accountable. But these women are somebody's mother, sister, daughter, and they're going to go back to society, and I hope they don't come out more scarred than when we sent them there.
Yes, sir.
So please hear all of our concerns.
Yes, sir. And I can assure you we'll continue to look at it
And let's don't forget the mail transportation either. I'm certain many of the stories we've heard could certainly apply to men, and just because it's one of the ladies testified that the women are nicer than men. There's some pretty nice guys that have screwed up and got incarcerated that deserve a second chance, and certainly be treated like a human being while you've got them under your supervision. So
Yes,
go
sir.
to work.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions.
Senator Hoffman.
Just to follow up a little bit with what Senator Whitmire was saying. Post Lopez, we looked at it, you and I have talked.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
mean, the agencies, you met with my staff and so forth, and we really basically asked you, what do you need to fix this problem?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that fair? And I think we
Absolutely.
tried to respond to that. Post Lopez, that was an inmate who literally kind of slipped through the system. There were a lot of mistakes. We've all
Yes, ma'am.
acknowledged that. And slaughtered a family. I mean,
Yes,
it was just horrific what happened. So I think, the concerns, I've listened carefully to the testimony. And so what I would challenge you is in the next couple of weeks or so forth, before we wrap up this budget, if there's something that you need to help with the I'm going to call it the hygiene or the sanitary side as it relates to women, I would certainly want to make sure that you have what you need.
Yes, ma'am.
Because we want to make sure that issue is taken care of. I understand the security, I understand your issue about you have to have them handcuffed, and you only have a certain number of guards that can be on these buses and so forth. So it is a difficult issue. I'm sure the ladies understand that too. It's just kind of almost difficult to resolve. But let's try to figure out the best way to do it. And if it's just about a little bit more money, I think it's very important that we as a state accomplish that. Okay?
Thank you. And I'll
Thank you,
circle
sir.
back. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Before you get away, let me publicly applaud you for going to body cameras for your correction officers.
Well, thank you for the support of that. Thank
Senator
you.
West, I can recall when those were certainly controversial for law enforcement, and they've proven to be probably the best tool to hold the good and the bad officers accountable, and I think we'll see the same experience in TDCJ. So let me recognize your hard work. How many years ago was that we would be in this committee fighting for body cameras for law enforcement?
2015. And let me say this, in terms of those body cameras, it's helped officers
Certainly.
from frivolous complaints also. And so that's been a positive.
It's helped officers, and I was at the Pulaski unit talking to the warden one Sunday, And he took me in his office and showed me his video cameras of his facility. And he said, Senator, I've been in TDCJ for 30-some-odd years, most of the last 20 at Warden, and this has been the best tool for safety for officers and inmates that I've ever seen. He said, we were holding an inmate responsible for starting a fight because he had blood all over him. And then we discovered by the video that he was actually the peacemaker and separated. And then he saw an officer going out to the gate, and his marijuana package fell out of his back pocket. So I would urge finance and
Yes, sir.
and you to continue to place video cameras throughout our system because they're a game changer as well.
Yes, sir. No, thank you for the support you've given us for the comprehensive video, but also the body cameras. And it is safety and security, but I'll tell you, part of my motivation is to change the culture inside. And I think the body cameras will go a long way to help us do that.
I think it'll go, obviously, to address some of the concerns we've heard from our witnesses this
Yes, sir.
morning, too. And I don't know about those strip searches. Seems to me like you need to review and make certain maybe how that's supervised.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Hinojosa.
thank you. And I think what we did, Senator Huffman, we did add additional funding for body cameras and
Yes, sir.
other cameras within facilities for security purposes, including funding for mobile MRIs and other medical equipment to try to minimize the travel
Yes, sir.
that's many times required just for simple x-rays.
Yes, sir. You absolutely have, and that's one of the things we learned post-Lopez escape was that we're moving way too many people every day, nearly 2,000. And as indicated earlier, last week we're around 1,100. So we have been able to reduce transports. That's because of the funding that you've given us and the resources.
And we
Grateful.
try to address many of those issues, budget request at today's Senate bill.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Let me ask before you get away, what's your census of men this morning? Or
Correct.
no, forget the men. Total population.
Total is 126, starting to begin to climb now. The courts have kind of gotten into full swing, so we're seeing about 1,000 a month increase.
And
It
prior to
started-
COVID, you maxed out, prior to COVID, what, 147? What?
Prior COVID was what, 147, but bottom end of COVID was 116.
And all time, when you and I were working on this 20 years ago, we had 150 what?
156, yeah.
Wow. And we've closed how many prisons in the
11.
last 10 years?
11 in Texas.
That's amazing. And some of those were turned back to the local community, and I assume some were mothballed?
Some are mothballed, and some are able, if we ever need them again, we can go back in. But some are actually, we sold the property, and they have been,
And
taken.
some are being used for border security?
We have 2 of our active facilities that are being used for border facilities.
What do you mean by active?
They're current facilities. We didn't idle them. We've used them, but we have one in Dilley, Texas, and one in Edinburgh that are part of Operation
Do you
Lone
keep a
Star.
running count of that?
Yes, sir.
Group.
There's about 500 between the 2 right now, population-wise.
Okay, Brian, thank you. I think we're very fortunate to have you in your position.
Thank you, and I'll continue to look at those issues.
I've worked with a half a dozen or more, and I won't start grading them, but you're doing a really great job, and I know you're a man of faith that let that direct you on a daily basis, and I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Angela Xavier? Oh, you were just a resource witness, Ms. Xavier. Ms. Xavier, I will introduce you to the senators and the public. You're just been made the warden at the Stiles Unit in Beaumont, which is one of our more challenging units. And quite frankly, I understand you house a lot of inmates on their way over to the Galveston John Seeley Hospital. So you've got a real challenge, and we're very fortunate to have you in that position. So thank you, and be safe. And the chairman of finance and all the senators would be interested in hearing any, not today, but when you get down there, any assistance you need. What's your background? How long have you been with TDCJ? I just can't pass the opportunity. I'm so proud of you. Tell me your name and
Good
and who
morning.
you represent.
Yes, sir. Good morning. My name is Angela Chevalier. I am a senior warden for the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. I have been in the agency for going on 20 years now.
Well, how long have you been a warden?
I've been a warden about 5 now. Yes, sir.
At more than one unit, I bet.
At many units. I started my career at the Wynn unit, then I went to Terrell, then I went to Darrington, I went to Connolly.
Wow.
I have been at Hospital Galveston and Carroll Young twice.
Started out as a correction
I
officer?
started off as a correctional officer, yes, sir.
Where'd you grow up? Where you from?
I'm from the Houston, Texas area.
That's great. You know, you're probably uniquely qualified to address women's concerns. I would be, I understand you're a part of the system, but you also have a huge responsibility, and you're uniquely qualified. I hope you'll help the system, and anything you can add to the challenge of female inmates.
Yes, sir, I agree. I agree that we are in the human, like we deal with a human product. It is very challenging to help someone who has found themselves in this position to grow into a better person in the prison environment. So it's our responsibility to make sure that we help them before they get out.
I've always, and I've been visiting prisons now for almost 30 years, been in untold number. I've always thought it had to be a challenge for men to supervise the women. And then I learned that it's even more challenge for the women to supervise the men. So I guess you just have to run a no-nonsense prison and hold everyone accountable.
I personally don't find an issue with supervising people because I know that I'm dealing with a human being.
Yes.
If you treat most people with a certain amount of respect, you will get it in general. You do have those outliers because you have certain people who have their own personalities. But in general, if you give someone a certain amount of respect and you provide them with the things that they need, you have less problems.
Yes, ma'am.
So I haven't had to.
Well, thank you for your service. I know the Stiles unit is one of the tougher, more challenging units, so it's a real tribute to your capability that you've been assigned that unit. So be safe, and I hope to not hear from you because we go where the problems are. So thank you for being here today.
Okay, thank you very much.
Jacqueline Benstani, Austin Society of Texas, is in support, does not wish to testify. Thomas Parkinson is present, does not wish to testify. Dennis Borrell, Coalition of Texans with Disabilities, is in support of the bill, does not wish to testify. Hannah Gill is here and wishes to not testify but be in support. Anyone else present would like to testify for committee substitute for Senate Bill 1146? Not public testimony is closed. Senator Flores moves that committee substitute for Senate Bill 1146 be reported back to full Senate with a favorable recommendation. Clerk call the roll.
Whitmire.
Yes.
Flores. Hinojosa. Miles. 4-0, sir.
4 ayes, no nays. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 1146 is reported back to full Senate with a favorable recommendation. Senator Flores moves that committee substitute for Senate Bill 1146 be certified for local and consent. Is there objection? Chair is none, so granted. I don't care.
23.
So I can do it. How long is this next bill, Wes?
It's going to take 5 minutes.
Because I've got a meeting I've got to sit in on in a moment. That's no problem. Senator West, on Senate Bill 2287, which there is a substitute, and Senator Flores moves that committee substitute for Senate Bill 2287 be passed. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute for Senate Bill 2287? Chair is none, so granted. Would you explain the difference, Senator West, on 2287?
The difference in the two,
The committee substitute.
The committee substitute is that it only allows doctors to make decisions about temporary detention. in these hospitals. That's the only difference. This bill was passed, members, during the 84th legislative session and was vetoed by the governor because it was an issue concerning Fourth Amendment rights. We've worked that out. We're continuously working with the governor as it relates to this. What issue are we trying to address? What we're trying to address is when someone goes to a hospital or an emergency room in a hospital for a voluntary commitment, and that person presents to a doctor, and the doctor knows that person may be a danger to themselves or someone else. Right now, nothing can be done. This particular bill will allow a doctor to make a determination as to whether or not that person should be held for at least 4 hours and taken into a protective order being placed against that person, or that person should be released.
You're not allowing a doctor or medical assistants to apprehend someone?
Only, exactly.
Sir?
No, I'm not.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Hinojosa.
thank you. I guess in a way, it's pretty similar to a bill that I filed and passed out of the Senate last week, I think, dealing with emergency type of situations where we allow a doctor to be able to ask for a warrant to be able to hold that person.
Well, it's the only difference is that the doctor would be able to do that under your bill. This right here allows the doctor to hold the person for at least 4 hours.
Correct.
And make the determination as to whether or not they're going to try to get a mental health warrant.
From a practical term, you say hold them against their
I
will.
shouldn't say hold them, but at least they'd have to stay at the hospital for at least 4 hours.
And I assume they have the backup of a law enforcement or security agent.
If necessary, right.
If necessary.
The issue was, at least it was a Fourth Amendment issue, but we've looked at the case law, and there's not a Fourth Amendment issue if the person presents a danger to themselves or to someone else.
And that doctor fills out some declaration, some
Yes.
form
Yes. It's
that would be reviewed by whom?
Well, the test is whether or not the doctor is acting in good faith and with balance. If they're acting.
No, but who's going to grade the doctor's paper? If I'm a doctor and I just don't like you, so I'm going to say, I'll show you what I can do. Do you? How's it going? What's the prevention against it being abused?
I mean, you can file a suit against the doctor. And if it's determined that it's not in good faith and with malice, then you could get damage.
Okay, very good. We have some witnesses for you. Rebecca Skillern. Officer Skillern. State your name and who you represent, please.
I'm Sergeant Rebecca Skillern with the Houston Police Department. There were actually a couple of things I wanted to mention with regard to the doctors having the hold on the patient once they're there. Currently, what they have to do is call for law enforcement to show up on scene and do an emergency detention order, which is really not the most appropriate use for the EDO. For doctors to be able to do the 4-hour hold, they can then process an order of protective custody and have that done so that they can go through the magistrate, and they have to present the material to the magistrate in order for that to be processed.
So it's really kind of buying some time?
Yes, sir. It
folks
keeps
to
someone who's
activate
suicidal or a potential danger to someone else from leaving the hospital and being able to carry through with that. What I'm asking for with regard to law enforcement is that we extend it even to allow paramedics and some mental health professionals to complete the emergency detentions as well. Currently, we require that be done by a peace officer in the state of Texas, and in situations where people are in crisis and they're violent, that makes really good sense. However, the majority of cases we come into, people are not violent, they're very cooperative, and they can be transported and checked in by non-police professionals. So we're asking that both paramedics and other mental health professionals be allowed the opportunity to do this as well. The reason behind that, and just a small example of what we've experienced over the past few years. From 2020 to 2022, we completed, just the Houston Police Department, not all law enforcement, but just HPD, we completed 33,716 emergency detentions. That takes approximately 4 hours apiece. That comes out to being 100.
Interrupting so everyone understands. What, don't pay attention. What's an emergency detention?
An emergency detention is what a police officer completes to take a person against their will in for a mental health assessment.
So I go to an emergency room, is that where it normally begins?
We can go to either a psychiatric emergency center or a hospital with a dedicated emergency department.
Someone calls 911.
72 hours, 72 hours.
48.
48, yeah, 48.
48 hours. The emergency detention allows the location, the facility, to keep them for 48 hours.
So that wouldn't be like Ben Top, that would be more like the psychiatric hospital?
It would be Ben Taub. Ben Taub has a dedicated emergency department. So in the state of Texas, we don't have that many psychiatric emergency centers to do those assessments and stabilize the person and then transfer them to longer-term treatment. So we are forced to use hospitals with dedicated emergency departments, which is something that is allowed for under the EMTALA Act, which is federal.
I've been told by Ben Taub emergency doctors that because there is no room at the psychiatric hospital, when they have someone that's having an episode, they just use drugs to hold them, put them in some waiting area because they have no other alternatives.
Well, they
Is
are allowed to stabilize them with medications.
Yeah.
So that requires an MD. It can't be done by a psychologist.
So when would they call you? When someone's acting up?
Well, people call 911 for all kinds of things, and especially when one of their family members is having an episode where they become psychotic or possibly violent or extremely depressed. It can range from...
Yeah, that could be at home or anywhere, at the
Yes, sir.
workplace. But we're talking in this legislation, if they have that experience at a medical facility, Ben Taub,
Yes, sir.
the legislation is proposing for 4 hours, a doctor can hold someone while someone's doing, I guess, a involuntary commitment?
Right now, the hospitals are having a call for law enforcement to come do an emergency detention if the person is a true danger to self or others and they need to keep them there. The hospital personnel cannot keep them without that.
So they would call you, HPD, to come be present while they, quote, confine someone?
They will call us to come fill out the paperwork so they can continue to do their job to stabilize the person and keep them from being...
To continue to give them the medical attention
Correct.
that they're trying to administer?
Right, but they can't do that.
They can't do it, or the person can get up and walk out to Herman Drive.
Correct. And they don't always get to the person right away because the hospital ERs tend to be a little bit busy, especially since
Sure.
COVID, and so they don't often get to the patients very quickly.
Well, thank you for being here. We heard your suggestions, and there's always an opportunity to improve legislation as we go forward. So thank you for being here. Be safe out there. Crystal Okafor. State your name and who you represent.
Good morning. My name is Crystal Okorafor, and I represent the City of Houston, Chairman Whitmire, and the Senate Committee on Criminal Justice. Thank you for allowing me this morning to testify in support of the committee substitute for Senate Bill 2287. In my role as the Deputy Inspector General for the City of Houston, I oversee the Office of Policing Reform and Accountability, which was created to improve police policies and build mutual trust within the city's diverse communities. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, mental health has increased significantly in Houston and all Texas cities. In response to this growing concern, along with others, Mayor Turner's Task Force on Policing Reform was created. The task force looked at best practices across the nation to make recommendations on 6 different parts, and what was significant was the crisis intervention piece. A key recommendation of the task force was strengthening existing partnerships between law enforcement, mental health professionals, and social service organizations to reduce officer workloads when responding to mental health crises. The Houston Police Department has taken great steps to enhance the working relationship with crisis intervention partners, to embrace a continuous and evolving approach with mutual respect for each other's strengths and weaknesses. As a result of funding from the American Rescue Plan Act, Mayor Turner has launched One Safe Houston in February of 2022, which is a holistic, comprehensive initiative to combat violent crime. It's produced a 8% drop in violent crime in its first year, and as part of that public safety initiative, $22 million was allocated to support and strengthen our law enforcement and mental health professionals. To ensure law enforcement continues to get the resources they need, the committee substitute for Senate Bill 2287 is essential. These additional resources enable other law enforcement to provide detention other individuals besides law enforcement to provide detention in these emergency detention orders for individuals facing a mental health crisis. As Sergeant Slinker just said, sorry.
No, go ahead and finish.
Just briefly, HPD is seeing about over 1,000 calls every year or every month about emergency detention orders, and so this bill will help alleviate that 4 hours, so that they can go out and continue to do what they need to do to focus on protecting life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thank you.
Any questions?
Ask a question.
Senator King.
Yes, sir.
And I'm sorry, Chairman, I was voting next door, so I missed the first part of this. So, as I understand it, what happens is hospital has somebody in there, they need to be detained for at least 4 hours while they go and get an emergency action to try to get them help long term. The hospital can't do that on their own, so they call the police out there.
Yes, sir.
The police have to spend time filling out the paperwork and doing it. Practically speaking, do the police ever get there and look at the person and say, no, I'm not going to agree with the doctor and not fill out the paperwork? Or do they?
No, so the police would just be there to do the hold and to do the paperwork, and so because they were the only ones that could do the
But
application.
what's the decision that the law enforcement has to make when they get there?
I think
I'm an officer, I get called out there, the hospital says this person needs to be detained for 4 hours, the doctor believes that's correct. What does the officer do? What decision do they have to make?
they submit the paperwork to the courts for the emergency detention order
Okay, does the officer have to make any
and the
kind of,
detention.
does the officer have to make any kind of determination?
Excuse me for interrupting you. Would you like for me to call the officer back?
Yes, Sergeant Slinker's probably the best to
Yeah.
handle
I'm
that.
sorry, Chairman.
No, that's all right. We understand. It's a tough job. But I think it'd be fair to everyone to let the officer answer that question. State your name and who you represent.
Rebecca Skiller, and I'm with the Houston Police Department. When they call the officer to the location, they have to present us with the information that indicates why the person is a danger to self or others or deteriorating to the point that they may become so. Based on that information, we can fill out an emergency detention order for them to continue to assess and offer treatment to the individual.
So practically speaking, in practice, does the officer ever go in and interview the person himself or look at him and say, no, I think, doctor, you're probably wrong, we shouldn't do this?
We can, however, the emergency detention offers the opportunity for a credible third party because mental health is very gray, and a person who has serious mental health issues can deny that they've said things or done things in the presence of an officer where they have already
And I guess
displayed
that's kind of what I'm
behaviors
asking.
prior to that.
Practically, does that ever really happen, or does the officer just end up being there to fill out the paperwork? I mean, does the officer, you see very often where the officer actually intervenes, has questions, and brings in that third party or something, or is it really just a paperwork deal?
Both and. Many times the officers, if the person is someone we can actually discuss things with, if they're stable enough for us to ask questions, we will do that. Then we take the totality of the circumstances into consideration, and we usually will not go against a doctor who says that the person needs stabilization. So we will base it
Guess
on
I'm
a
just trying to
credible
figure
third
out,
party.
Does law enforcement really have a role of making a determination, or are they just filling out paperwork?
Once they're already at the hospital, it's basically just semantics. We just fill out the paperwork. And so we're called out of service from our community into the hospital to fill out paperwork that the doctor should be allowed to fill out to begin with.
Okay, thank you, Chairman.
You're welcome. Thank you, officer. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you for your public service. Dr. Fernandez? State your name and who you represent, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Dr. Benigno Fernandez. I'm a licensed physician in the state of Texas, and I represent Lower Ridge Treatment Center in San Antonio, Texas. I've been a practicing psychiatrist in the state of Texas for 28 years. And then hospitals encounter patients in severe mental crisis on a daily basis, and most often patients can be assessed and placed in the appropriate treatment setting upon collaboration between the patient and the physician. In some cases, a person initially requests mental health services at a hospital, then subsequently asks to leave. Under the current law, the emergency departments and hospitals are not authorized to hold that individual. In cases where the physician believes the person is at substantial risk of serious harm to self or others, or unless immediately detained, it is imperative to consider all options to provide the appropriate care in the appropriate setting. Currently, hospitals are dependent on police officers who are very often handling serious crimes or public safety emergencies. And at times when an officer shows up, a patient might be triggered because the way they react to authority figures in situations that can be very unpredictable. The temporary detention is an option in crisis situations and could be ordered by a physician to temporarily keep the person in a secure place, such as a hospital. Under the committee substitute for SB 2287, the detention will be for up to 4 hours. The purpose of the hold is to keep the person safe while deciding the next steps. The temporary detention can avoid a high-risk situation or avoid the person leaving and subsequently being arrested on a criminal charge. This procedure will enhance patient safety and mental health care while also giving relief to law enforcement.
Any questions? Thank you, Doctor, for being here. You're free.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Anyone else like to testify for committee substitute for Senate Bill 2287? Not, I have some opposition. Are you for it, sir? No, I'm going to get right to you.
Is this one in opposition or for?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm for 2287.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm for 2287.
You're in support?
Of opposition.
Yeah, I'm going to get to opposition. I was just trying to get all the yeses. Now, there are some individuals signed up in opposition. First, Judy Powell. I'm just going in the order that the cards were given to me. Ms. Powell, will you state your name and who you represent?
Sorry for the confusion. Wasn't sure. I've never been before this committee. I wasn't sure how you.
Well, take a deep breath. You'll be fine.
Okay, deep breath. Okay. My name is Judy Powell, and I'm with Parent Guidance Center. I've been advocating for parents involved in the CPS.
Speak into the mic.
I've been advocating for parents involved in the child welfare system for 19 years now. I was part of a veto campaign for a very similar bill back in 2015. That was SB 359, and this bill currently before you is very similar. As Senator West said, that bill was vetoed in 2015. I wanted to kind of break it down because you've heard how things go down in the hospital, but from a parental rights standpoint, in the veto letter that went to the governor, a parental rights attorney wrote a section of it, and I'd like to read that part so you can see how parents are involved in this. In that bill, it was 359. Yes, it'll be less than 2 minutes.
No problem.
He said that SB 359, and this bill is very similar, opens wide the door to abuse of parental rights by unethical professionals. While the bill as drafted looks to protect a person with mental illness from himself or others, it also allows the doctor to force his preferences on parents who may disagree with proposed treatment or who want a second opinion. Parts of the bill clearly contemplate children where a facility may detain somebody who lacks capacity to consent. Those sections give police detention powers to facilities, including for-profit facilities. The criteria for exercising that power is vague and subjective as relates to mental health. He goes on to say that many doctors already call CPS on parents who choose to move a child from one facility to another for treatment, and they may want a second opinion before that treatment begins. He said that it is not a conspiratorial stretch to contemplate that a doctor faced with a caring parent who wants a second opinion to declare that that child is mentally ill and that the parents are the substantial risk because they want the child to go to a different facility for a second opinion. And sometimes those children are restrained or kept locked in their rooms until CPS can be called to support the doctor's preference. Hospitals already illegally hold children at times who are already set to leave the facility, and they'll wait to call CPS, and they do these CPS holds on them, and that also applies to psych facilities as well as regular children's hospitals. And he goes on to say that official cover, this covers an evil practice. I want y'all to go into this bill with eyes wide open and read the governor's proclamation. It included more than just the Fourth Amendment. The governor said the Fourth, Fifth, and 14th Amendments were of the United States Constitution limit the state's authority to deprive a person of liberty. So I'd really encourage all of you to please, please, please read the governor's veto proclamation from 2015 as relates to this bill.
Any questions? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Lee Spiller. State your name, who you represent.
Thank you. My name is Lee Spiller. I'm with the Citizens Commission on Human Rights, and we're opposed to the bill. As far as emergency rooms go, if you're trying to restrain somebody to keep them from hurting themselves or others, I don't know why you wouldn't be protected by, I think it's Chapter 9 of the Penal Code, use of force in defense of life. But this bill doesn't just apply to emergency rooms. It also applies to somebody who showed up to inquire about care and now they want to leave. Unfortunately, there's been a problem with that. In 2013, WFAA in Dallas reported on 3 women who went into hospitals and I think they were in emergency rooms and they fell victim to psych hospital recruiters. 2017 and 18, the CBS affiliate in the Dallas-Fort Worth area reported on a psych hospital injecting kids with something called booty juice and illegally holding people against their will. That hospital was criminally indicted and eventually convicted. In 2018, 2 women sued a psych hospital in DeSoto, alleging that they visited the hospital to inquire about outpatient services and were held against their will. In 2022, a federal judge backed a healthcare racketeering verdict in one patient's case against a telemedicine company and a psych hospital. She, too, had gone to the psych hospital to inquire about outpatient care and was held against her will. This bill does not provide adequate protection against that. Good peace officers, good CIT guys, they do look at the criteria and they do make the call. Cops deal with danger every day. You're always having to decide whether a situation is going to be dangerous or could be. They're qualified. Let's let them do their job. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spiller. Holly Valdez. State your name, Ms. Valdez. Try to hold it to 2 minutes.
Haley Valdez, and I'm against this bill. As your constituent, registered voter, and a mental health advocate who has experience and training in the prevention of mental health crisis, I'm here today to express my opposition to SB number 2287. I'm concerned this bill may cause more harm than good to individuals seeking mental health treatment. It would take away an individual's ability to decide how and where they receive medical and mental health support and allow their symptoms to be up for vague interpretation or misconstrued. This bill would allow one to be detained against their will and without court order at a mental health facility or hospital by a physician, physician's assistant, advanced practicing registered nurse, or peace officer if said patient is disabled due to mental illness or is believed to pose a risk to themselves or others due to emotional distress and or mental deterioration. This bill emphasizes a need to detain and remove from the public a person who is seeking mental health treatment rather than advocating for necessary and personalized medical care that could prevent ongoing trauma. As someone who has been held against their will at a mental health facility in Texas and has worked closely with members of the community who are going through mental health crisis, I am concerned for the long-term effects this could have on someone who is simply trying to receive support. Thinking back on my time in the hospital, I remember feeling unsupported, defeated, and fearful. My autonomy over my care was taken away and resulted in my mental and physical state worsening. I did not know when I would be let out, and I had minimal access to outside support. I witnessed others having to go through much worse, being detained for months, with no idea when they would be able to go home. What's worse is the system makes it impossible to receive outside support from loved ones and places the burden on the detained patient to advocate for themselves. This bill would make it much more difficult for patients who have a hard time communicating to advocate for the release or health care inside these hospitals. Furthermore, it places an unnecessary financial burden on patients whose insurance may not cover such long care or inpatient treatment, causing further distress to individuals and their families once released. Working at the suicide hotline for 7 years, I would often hear people tell me they feared seeking mental health treatment because they didn't want to be locked away in a hospital. I fear this bill would have the opposite of its intended effect by keeping people from seeking treatment due to stigma and fear of being further traumatized by the medical system.
Miss, are you just about wrapping up? Okay.
I ask that you consider the well-being of patients looking for treatment and vote no on SB number 2287.
Thank you. Good job. Dr. Lightfoot? Good morning, Ms. Lightfoot. Would you state your name and who you represent?
I'm Jan Elizabeth Lightfoot. I'm representing myself.
Proceed.
I'm here to disclose my experiences as a victim witness of disability and insurance fraud under the guise of court-ordered mental health, police wellness checks, and emergency detention orders. Although I'm a 52-year tenured worker, a 40-year licensed person, I was detained in a hospital when I drove myself there for a headache. My grandson was with me. I was not allowed to return to go to family outings, and then he was kept from me for 4 years until he returned. I've been retaliated against for reporting this as insurance fraud, and the whole Texas judicial system has been unresponsive and shut down on me, including the Houston Police Department, as recent as 2/23/23 this year. Police came to my home, EDO fishing for me by asking my grandson, was I mentally disturbed and unable to take care of myself. My grandson said, I know nothing about my grandmother being mentally ill because she takes care of me and many other people in her work as a chaplain and under the Southern Baptist Church and a licensed professional. So on May 4th, 2022, Medicare determined that the detention was fraudulent and took back all the money from the doctors, and is in the process of taking the money back from the hospital. When I was in the hospital, I was given Haldol.
Go ahead. You can wrap.
The Haldol would have been lethal, and I never have taken that. There was no delusion. I was dressed pretty much like I am now. There was no reason for me to be held. It was completely a mental health warrant meal. My grandson didn't know anything about this because I received good psychiatry from good doctors. I'm here to ask that we do uphold good psychiatry practice because everyone matters. And I would like to see the inclusion of people who have mental health diagnosis in American Liberty. And I would say even if a person is crazy, they do have rights. And I would like to see them upheld.
Thank you for being here, Ms. Lightfoot. Be safe.
Mm-hmm.
There's anyone else? Thank you, ma'am. There's no questions. Anyone else like to testify for or against committee substitute for Senate Bill 2287? I have a number of cards of witnesses that have signed in for and against. We'll read those into the record before we close today. Anyone else present like to testify? If not, public testimony is closed. Senator West.
I'd ask that you hold this bill. Let me do a little bit more work on this bill.
Yes, sir. Bill will be left pending. Senator Parker, You've been very tolerant, and I'll recognize you on 1011. Now I understand there's a committee substitute. Senator Flores lays out committee substitute for Senate Bill 1011. Is there objection to the adoption? Chair is none, so granted. I recognize Senator Parker to explain the substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you today and enjoyed the time here in the committee. Mr. Chairman, it takes me back to our old days when I had the blessing of chairing corrections over in the House and working together. The substitute specifically cleans up the language and removes the strangulation provision, as it would be a duplicative of a provision in Senator Huffman's SB 1527. It also corrects a drafting error to make it clear that the victim must be the one incarcerated, not the trafficker, as it was originally drafted. So Senate Bill 1011 seeks to enhance the penalty for human traffickers who recruit their victims from jails or correctional facilities. As you all are aware, human trafficking is a significant problem in Texas, with our state ranking second in the nation for the number of reported cases. I want Texas to be number one members in all things, but not in this horrific crime, as you all agree. Traffickers use various tactics to lure and control their victims, including recruitment from vulnerable populations, such as homeless individuals, runaways, and foster children. Some traffickers take advantage of their victims' vulnerable and isolated status by recruiting them from jails or correctional facilities. This type of recruitment is particularly heinous as victims are already in a vulnerable and restricted environment with limited options for assistance. Enhancing the penalty for traffickers who engage in this type of criminal activity can help deter such behavior and send a message that it will not be tolerated here in Texas. By increasing the punishment for these offenses, we can better protect vulnerable populations and hold traffickers accountable for their heinous crimes. And again, Mr. Chairman, appreciate the opportunity to be before you in the committee and bring this before you here today.
Thank you. Senator Hinojosa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And actually, Senator Parker, I do support your bill, but the issue with human trafficking is not just along the border. It's all over the state, from Houston to San Antonio to Dallas, Fort Worth. So it's not just unique to the border, but I do support your bill.
Thank Mr. Chairman. I agree. It's rampant. It's everywhere, and we're on the same page. Thank you, my friend.
There's a witness, David Grantham. Want to testify? State your name and who you represent.
Thank you for having me. My name is David Grantham. I'm the Chief of Intelligence and Technology of the Tarrant County Sheriff's Office, and I'm here in support of SB 1011. Aside from my work at the Sheriff's Office, I am also a veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan, where I specialize in intelligence operations. I'm also an adjunct professor of history. I just say that to say this: I'm familiar with the history and the application of the challenges presented by criminality, and human trafficking, as we can agree, is probably the most pernicious crime imaginable. But there's a key evil practice within this crime, and that's manipulation and recruitment of vulnerable individuals inside our jail system. Some information for you. As you're aware, victims of trafficking are often forced to engage in criminal activity by their traffickers, such as small-scale theft all the way up to prostitution, which then puts them in touch with law enforcement and puts them in our jail system. We know traffickers will then force them under threats of violence while incarcerated to recruit other vulnerable victims to be trafficked. We also know traffickers will go online and use open source search information to identify potential victims within the jail system, recruit them, bond them out, and then force them into trafficking.
Wow.
Traffickers are using our jail system, our taxpayer-funded public safety system, to both capitalize on their victims and identify new ones. That has to end. Creating new penalties for recruitment inside a correctional facility recognizes the reality we're facing and allows Texas law enforcement to effectively pursue charges where none right now exist. SB 1011 is a step in further ridding our communities of this heinous crime. And I thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? No, sir, we're fine, and thank you for appearing. Tell Craig Driscoll I say hello.
I will, sir.
Tell him his
David,
uncle.
thank you for being here.
Yes, sir.
Great testimony.
Tell him his uncle said hello. Anyone else like to testify for or against committee substitute for Senate Bill 1011? If not, public testimony is closed. Senator Flores moves that committee substitute for Senate Bill 1011 be reported back to full Senate with a favorable recommendation. Clerk call the roll.
Whitmire.
Yes.
Flores.
Aye.
Hinojosa.
Aye.
Huffman. King. 5-0, sir.
5 ayes, no nays. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 1011 is reported back to full Senate with a favorable recommendation. Senator Flores moves that committee substitute for Senate Bill 1011 be certified for local and consent. Is there objection? Chair hears none, so granted. Senator Parker on 1266. Somebody in my office must like you, Senator Parker.
Mr. Chairman, I'm very grateful. Thank you for
Senator Parker.
giving me the attention this morning, allow me to lay out some bills. Again, Mr. Chairman and members, thank you for the opportunity to be before you to lay out 1266 this morning. 1266 addresses a pressing concern facing communities on both sides of the United States-Mexico border, where criminal activity is rampant and local law enforcement agencies are often overwhelmed and under-resourced. With the rise of illegal border crossings, criminal networks engage in a range of illegal activities, from trafficking drugs and weapons to committing acts of violence and theft. Many of these crimes occur in border towns and communities, as well as elsewhere, creating a thriving black market economy that is often fueled by organized criminal groups. This crisis has led many border counties to declare a disaster due to their overburdened resources and the danger posed to their citizens. Senate Bill 1266 applies to offenses committed in a disaster area as declared by the federal, state, or local government, and expands the list of offenses that may be enhanced if committed within a disaster area under Texas Penal Code. According to DPS, there was a 234% increase in human smuggling between 2016 and 2020. According to the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, during 2022, and in the El Paso sector alone, 186 stash houses were located, resulting in the rescue of 2,051 migrants. Therefore, the bill adds smuggling of persons and operation of a stash house to the list of offenses that have a penalty increase if committed within a disaster area. All punishments are enhanced to the next higher category of offense unless the offense is already punishable as a first-degree felony. This legislation is an important step in addressing the growing threat to public safety and security, and will provide law enforcement agencies with the necessary tools to combat criminal activity in disaster areas.
Anyone that would like to testify for or against Senate Bill 1266? There's no witnesses signed up. Senator Flores moves that Senate Bill 1266 be reported back to full Senate with a favorable recommendation. Clerk, call the roll.
Whitmire.
Yes.
Flores. Hinojosa.
Aye.
Huffman. King.
Yes.
5-0, sir.
I mean,
5.
5 ayes, no nays. Senate Bill 1266 is reported back to full Senate with a favorable recommendation. Senator Flores moves that Senate Bill 1266 be certified for local consent. Is there objection? Chair is none, so granted. Senator Parker on Senate Bill 1267.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So grateful for your time this morning. Stash houses are a significant issue in border communities where smugglers use these locations to hide immigrants, drugs, and other contraband. The light penalties for operating these houses have led to a proliferation of these locations and an increase in criminal activity. Senate Bill 1267 aims to address this issue by enhancing penalties for the operation of stash houses under Texas Penal Code. Currently, the operation of a stash house is a Class A misdemeanor, but this bill increases the penalty to a third-degree felony. Additionally, the penalty is further enhanced to a second-degree felony if the operation of a stash house results in sexual assault, aggravated sexual assault, serious bodily injury, or death. This bill seeks to deter individuals from operating stash houses and combat associated criminal activities at the border by increasing these penalties. And thank you, Mr. Chairman and members, again for your courtesy and allowing me to lay out this bill this morning.
We have a witness, Natalie Ebay, does not wish to testify but is in support. Anyone else present like to testify for or against Senate Bill 1267? If not, public testimony is closed. Senator Flores moves that Senate Bill 1267 be reported back to full Senate with a favorable recommendation. Clerk, call the roll.
Whitmire.
Yes.
Flores. Hinojosa.
Aye.
Huffman.
There being 4 ayes, no nays, Senate Bill 1267 is reported back to full Senate with a favorable recommendation. Senator Flores moves it be certified for local and consent. Is there objection? Senate Bill 1267 is certified for local and consent.
Mr. Chair, members, thank you again for your time. And
I got one more. What about Senator Parker? You had a pending bill 1388.
I believe so, yes.
Did you?
Drug consumption.
Yeah, I know the sites. Are you going,
Mr. Chairman, that was the one dealing with unauthorized consumption sites.
oh, yeah, I remember. Yeah. Where it's in Hinojosa, 1, 2, 3, 4. Senator Hinojosa, are you in support of the 1388? Senate Bill 1388?
1388?
Do you have a committee substitute?
I believe we do, yes.
I'm trying to get a green light.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
It's the one that we discussed about designated, no, you're prohibiting designated drug treatment sites. Not treatment, drug distribution sites.
Yeah, and I want to stress one thing, that the committee substitute expressly exempts methods.
Let me recognize you on committee substitute for Senate Bill 1388.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So, again, what we're doing is basically just enforcing proactively federal law that would stop these kinds of facilities from being put in place. But the substitute specifically addresses the commentary about helping people that are stepping down from being addicted to various medications and so forth. And so it exempts methadone clinics that are addressing those.
Designated certified treatment centers are going to be left alone. Okay. Thank you. Anyone, we've already had public testimony, so Senator Flores is going to move that committee substitute for Senate Bill 1388 be reported back to the full Senate with a favorable recommendation. Clerk, call the roll.
Whitmire.
Yes.
Flores. Hinojosa. King.
Yes.
4-0.
Before ayes, no nays, committee substitute for Senate Bill 1380 is reported back to full Senate with a favorable recommendation. Senator Flores moves that committee substitute for Senate Bill 1380 be certified for local and consent. Is there objection? Chair is none, so granted.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members.
Middleton, Senator Middleton, he's been patient. I recognize you, Senator Middleton. Senator Middleton on Senate Bill 436.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members, for allowing me to lay out Senate Bill 436 today. This bill deals with organ trafficking, and it's estimated that human organ trafficking accounts for up to 10% of transplants performed. And I have a resource witness here today where we estimate that that amounts to $840 million to $1.7 billion annually. It is a huge issue. Unfortunately, this is a highly profitable industry that presents a dangerous incentive to traffickers, and individuals have reported being misled or coerced or otherwise forced into selling organs. And currently, in the state of Texas, this really surprised me. The offense of purchasing or selling human organs is a Class A misdemeanor. And examples of Class A misdemeanor are criminal trespass, perjury, online impersonation, violating a protective order. Clearly, human organ trafficking is far greater crime than those types of misdemeanors. So what this bill would do, it would raise the criminal offense from a Class A misdemeanor to a state jail felony for purchasing or selling of human organs.
Very good. Any questions of the author? If not, anyone present that would like to testify for or against Senate Bill 436? Seeing none, maybe one. Bill's in really good shape, ma'am. State your name and who you represent. Did you fill out a card?
No.
Don't worry, we'll do it later. State your name and who you represent. We can do it when she finishes, Senator.
Good morning, committees, and good morning, legislature. My name is Jaslyn Huynh. I'm a PhD in criminal justice. I'm also executive director for the nonprofit organization Combating Global Organ Trafficking. And I'm here today to testify that I strongly support the SB 436 for the following reasons. Number one, human organ trafficking, the illegal purchasing and sales of human organs has become a primary international concern. And according to the United Nations plus other scientific research, the legally available organs for organ transplants accommodates roughly 10% of the global industry demand. And the shortage of human organs means every single 10 minutes, one patient is added to the waiting list. And daily, average 20 patients in the U.S. alone die while waiting for the matched organ. And due to the high demand for human organ, the crimes of human organ trafficking prevails as one of the most profitable crime, with an estimated $1.5 billion, with an estimate roughly from 12,000 illegal organ transplants. And the reason number two, that approximately 118,000 American patients while waiting for the matched organs, but only 16,648 organ donors was reported. Nearly 30,000 organ transplant procedures performed yearly. So the donation gap between supplies and demands raise a major concern. How could the human organs resource can provide almost double the number of organ transplant? And as a result, unethical and criminal practices of organ trafficking has to raise a major concern. Like it's time for us to do something to stop for this crime. And the last reason is that human organ trafficking
Go ahead and finish.
must be criminalized. And Texas Penal Code only charged 180 days to consider Class A misdemeanor. So I do believe that with the SB 436 and the severity of the punishments can deter the crimes.
Very
And
good.
thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you for being here, and fill out the card when you
Thank you so much.
get through. Anyone else present would like to testify for or against Senate Bill 436? If not, public testimony is closed. Senator Flores moves that Senate Bill 436 be reported back to full Senate with a favorable recommendation. Clerk, call the roll.
Whitmire.
Yes.
Flores.
Aye.
Hinojosa. King. 4-0.
4 ayes, no nays. Senate Bill 436 is reported back to the full Senate with a favorable recommendation. And Senator Flores moves that Senate Bill 436 be certified for local and consent. Is there objection? Chair is none, so granted. Thank you, Senator.
I am.
Senator Flores, you want to do yours or Creighton?
In the interest of being the vice chair, I'll do Creighton's first. Then
Very
I'll do
good.
mine last.
Very good. Senator Flores on Senate Bill 1257.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. When a family, this is on behalf of Senator Creighton of Senate Bill 1257, when a family has lost a loved one and an autopsy is conducted, it is unacceptable that images or other visual depictions of the autopsy be disclosed without the family's permission. Autopsies are a sensitive process for families at their most vulnerable moments. They are also a critical step for prosecutors when collecting evidence of a crime. While there is a penalty for the distribution or misuse of crime scene materials, the code is silent on images from autopsies. This bill creates an offense for the unlawful disclosure of an autopsy image by making it a Class B misdemeanor. The near identical bill passed unanimously out of this committee and the Senate in the 87th legislature regular session as Senate Bill 1388. Unfortunately, it ran out of time in the House, and Senator Creighton humbly asks for your support once again.
Very good. We have Cheryl Leak. Ms. Leak, you've been very tolerant. Sorry you had to wait so long, but it's the nature of the process.
Well, I'm going to give you the condensed version. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Good to see
State
you
your
again.
name, please, and who you represent.
Senator Flores. I represent Chambers County District Attorney's Office and myself and Tom Parkinson. No, I'm kidding. We are in favor of this bill, and I don't think there's any opposition against it. We have been working since last session with medical examiners and educators, and everybody seems to be on board. And I really don't need to go into the fact that it would be very disturbing for families of these people to see the images of their loved ones disseminated. So I'll take any questions.
Any questions, Ms. Leak? None. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay,
for being
thank you.
here.
Thank you for being here. Say hello to the folks in Chambers County.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Eric Carcerano does not wish to testify, but he is our Chambers County District Attorney. Thank you for being here. Anyone else would like to testify for or against Senate Bill 1257? If not, public testimony is closed. Senator Flores moves that Senate Bill 1257 be reported back to the full Senate with a favorable recommendation. Clerk, call the roll.
Whitmire.
Yes.
Flores.
Aye.
Hinojosa. King. 4-0, sir.
4 zeros and no nays. Senate Bill 1257 is reported back to full Senate with a favorable recommendation. Senator Flores moves that Senate Bill 1257 be certified for local and consent. Is there objection? Chair is none so granted. Chair recognizes Senator Flores on Senate Bill 2612.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, the legislature supports significant funding. The Alamo Complex is currently undergoing a massive effort to restore dignity and reverence to the sacred historic site through the comprehensive Alamo Plan. Currently, the Alamo Rangers provide security for the Alamo. The Alamo Rangers are not commissioned peace officers, but are private security officers employed by the Alamo Trust, a nonprofit corporation that runs the day-to-day operations at the Alamo on behalf of the General Land Office. The Alamo Rangers perform routine security enforcement, including patrolling the grounds, inspecting and safeguarding buildings, properties, and equipment, directing traffic, and assisting the visitors. They do not have the legal authority to detain or arrest a person engaged in unlawful behavior at the Alamo. In case of unruly visitors or unrest, they must contact the San Antonio PD to respond to these incidents because the city's officers can make arrests if needed. With several large municipalities across the state and nation facing police department staffing issues, not having licensed peace officers at the Alamo puts additional strain on SAPD at the complex and puts an additional strain that can on our officers that can result in delayed response times for our visitors at the Alamo. The purpose of Senate Bill 2612 is to ensure the Alamo complex is adequately protected now and in the future during the construction of the Alamo Plan. And currently, the Alamo Rangers cannot fully protect the complex and the state's significant investment of more than $400 million in the Alamo. While security measures have been increased during construction, including overnight security, the Alamo Rangers must rely on SAPD to handle criminal incidents. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this will provide for peace officer authority granted under 2.12 of the CCP under the General Land Office, and I ask for your support on this bill, along with the delegation from Bexar County.
Very good, Senator. Jeff Gordon with the Texas Land Office is a resource witness. Angie Williams with the General Land Office is also a resource witness. And Natalie Ebay is in support. Anyone else present would like to testify for or against Senate Bill 2612? Not. Public testimony is closed. Senator Hinojosa moves that Senate Bill 2612 be reported back to full Senate with a favorable recommendation. Clerk, call the roll.
Whitmire.
Yes.
Flores.
Aye.
Hinojosa.
Aye.
King.
Aye.
4-0, sir.
There being 4 zeros, no nays, Senate Bill 2612 is reported back to full Senate with a favorable recommendation. Senator Hinojosa moves that Senate Bill 2612 be certified for local and consent. Is there objection? Chair is none so granted. I think that's all to come before the committee. Good morning, members. Thank y'all. We stand in recess.
Thank you for hanging with us.